Great. Well, good morning, everyone. It is April 25th, 2025, and this is our Earth Day, Earth Month Commission meeting. Welcome, everyone. If we could begin with some roll call. Ross, if you could assist.
Good morning, Chair. There you go. Hello.
Hello. Perfect.
Okay. Chair, your roll call is as follows. Chair Islam,
Present.
Vice Chair Otsuka,
Present.
Commissioner Romine,
He was visible a minute ago. I think he's having some audio issues. So,
we'll come back to him.
yes, thank you.
Commissioner Olsen,
Present.
and new Commissioner Ma.
Present.
Going back to Commissioner Romine. He is on. So would you like me to mark him present?
Yeah, it's just mark him present. I think he's having some computer issues, but I know he's present. So let's do a visual acknowledgement.
Present. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Cross.
You have no problem. Chair, you have quorum, and this concludes your roll call.
Great. Thank you so much, Cross. Great to see everyone. I just want to acknowledge that we are live on Facebook, and we also have one individual in our meeting room today. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to move through our agenda right now. We're going to go to item number 3, which is the March 7, 2027 meeting minutes. I don't believe we are able to approve them as they were not officially in our packet. But we can certainly review them and discuss if there are any sort of changes, what have you, that might be needed. But I'm going to recommend that we defer the vote to our May 6th meeting when we can include it in our packet. So commissioners, have you had a chance to look at those meeting minutes? Is there anything that we would like to make change to for our May packet? Great. Seeing nods of no, I'm going to say that it looks good. So Cross, if we can include in our May packet, we'll do the official vote then. Awesome, thank you. Moving right along, I'm really happy to do this. I want to introduce our new commissioner, Sandy Ma, to the commission. It is our great privilege to have her. Sandy Ma is an attorney with experience in government, policy, planning, and climate resilience. So let's give a big welcome to Sandy. Sandy, if you would like, if you can have the floor for a few minutes to introduce yourself to the commission and to the public.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandy, and I'm really honored and excited to be a part of this really dynamic commission. I'm excited to be working with all the commissioners and the staff of the Honolulu Climate Change Commission. This is a really wonderful commission. It's so active. I've been following the work of this commission for many years and just really happy to be part of this work and to get to work with people again and to work with some of the commissioners again and staff as well. I'm particularly interested in land use issues and how land use impacts climate change and climate resiliency. I have worked in managed retreat efforts and would like to continue that role if possible and work with the commissioners and staff and policy in that. And of course, climate migration is such a developing field and is so such an urgent need in our island community and other islands. So those are some couple of issues that I'm particularly interested in and love to learn more from everyone on this great commission and from staff working in this issue. Thank you so much. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great, Sandy, Commissioner Ma, that was wonderful. I think your focus on land use, that intersection of land use and climate change, and then working with us on manager cheater and mitigation and migration are excellent topics. So look forward to sort of diving into that further as we develop our content at the Commission. Great. I am going to move on to item number 6. Oh, excuse me. I was so excited to introduce you, Sandy, that I skipped over our Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. I apologize, but we're all family, so we can be flexible. So I'm going to turn it over to Director Sullivan. Hello. If you would love to give an update from the office, that would be great.
I would be thrilled to do so. Thank you, Chair. And welcome, Commissioner Ma. It's a pleasure to see you again. I know the last time we worked together was on the state's carbon sequestration task force years ago. So it's exciting to be here in the space with you again. I will begin the report by saying that April has been a really busy, really exciting month. As you all know, Cross-Makani Crab started with the office just recently as a new office manager, and helping to manage the team and myself, which is a huge task, as well as working with the Commission to make sure that we can make these meetings happen successfully every month. The first announcement I want to make relates to disasters and information flow. One of the things that we know about climate change is it implies more impacts, more frequently, more severe. The Department of Emergency Management and the city have recently launched a new product called HNL Alert, which allows the city to quickly provide registered users with critical information during situations such as severe weather, evacuations, unexpected disruptions to key services, or unplanned road closures. You can sign up for HNL Alert. You can sign up at hnlalert.gov. We have a goal of 225,000 subscribers, so if you can help us, anyone who's on the call, by signing up, getting that on your phone, getting yourself available for those messages, we'd greatly appreciate it. Moving forward, current happenings. One of the big things that happened this month that many of you may be aware of is we launched our annual sustainability report on Earth Day, which was just this week. We had a great event at the Blaisdell Center, and the event was concurrent to the opening of a brand new and large PV system on top of the parking structure there that will power the facility, along with some battery storage. So really exciting stuff there. I want to run through a few bullets from the annual sustainability report, Chair, if that's okay with you, just to give you some highlights and share highlights to everyone on the call. So one of my favorites, being the former energy program manager, is excluding the increased use at Skyline, as Skyline has come online. City facilities have used less grid electricity every year since 2018, accounting for more than a 20% reduction of use in that time. So really an impressive stat for the city broadly. A lot of credit goes to DDC, the Department of Design and Construction, but also Environmental Services and Board of Water Supply have large loads, and they've done a lot to bring their loads down every year as well. City facilities generated 10.5 million kilowatt hours, otherwise known as 10,500 megawatt hours of renewable energy last year, which is an 8% increase over the previous year. And with the projects in the pipeline, we expect a substantial increase to be reported next year as well. 1,288 trees were planted by the city, a portion of the 3,500 trees planted island-wide last year. This is behind our goal, but it is progress, and so we're going to continue to work on that, see if there's ways we can find to accelerate it. Island-wide, the number of electric vehicles. So this is a celebration of everybody and their progress on EVs. The increase to over 25,000. So over 25,000 EVs on island compared to about 21,000 in last year, or I'm sorry, in 2023. So I'm reporting 2024 to 2023. Which was a 22% increase. So really, really impressive increase. It's really starting to look like an S-curve on that adoption. An important figure here, island-wide daily per capita water consumption decreased for the second year in a row, 2.5% lower than the previous year. And over 1,300 individuals received disaster preparedness training offered by the city last year. Ending on a note about food hubs and local food, island-wide sales from Oʻahu food hubs reached over 7.5 million, excuse me, last year, which is a 5% increase, a 5.7% increase over the previous year. I am going to drop the link to the interactive dashboard into the chat and then continue. Actually, I will ask colleagues to do so. If not, I'll do so after my report, so I don't have to slow everybody down here. The next thing I'd like to announce is the EKI Art Contest. And this is an exciting effort by the team to really embrace our community and give opportunities for people to be creative and think about art in a really appropriate and locally thoughtful way tied to Hawaiian culture and the importance of food and relationships to food and how it plays a part in our communities. This is a project being led by Jason Sean, who is our food security and sustainability program manager. And again, there's a link to that. I'm not going to go into too far into detail, but there's a survey associated with the food system plan that's being worked on, and that's one of the reasons to have this contest, is to raise awareness. The contest ends May 30th, 2025, and if again someone can drop that link, really what we're trying to do is get people thinking about these issues with us and engage us as much as possible. Bill 15, as you all know, is a bill that offers additional guidance in terms of how the city will address the climate resiliency fund. And so, as everyone knows, climate resiliency fund was passed in November by voters. Bill 15 has already gone through a second reading and is continuing forward at council. And we are very excitedly following that. I am also going to drop a link there. We're really excited about the opportunity to do a couple of things. One is to accelerate the progress we're making on planning for adaptation. And there's obviously a real serious need to accelerate that progress, knowing that the impacts are already here and accelerating. And so the pace at which we do this planning, so that we can then begin some of the construction and modifications and all the other things, is essential, and this fund is going to allow us to do that. And then additionally, we hope to offer support to community, both to community-based organizations and potentially to individual households for areas where we can help them improve resilience. And those are some of the things being talked about and worked through with Bill 15. So a really important piece of legislation at City Council. Another exciting thing happening here at CCSR is our ongoing climate action plan update. And the team has been out, and they are continuing to go out into community and learn and get feedback. And that's a really exciting development. Recent CAP workshops were held. There was 3 in April, one at Aiea Public Library, one in Kalihi, and one at Eva Beach. There's several more coming up. The most immediate coming up are there's one in Kahuku on Tuesday 4/29, one at Manoa Public Library Monday 5/5, and one Tuesday 5/13 at Pearl City Public Library. So they're doing those about weekly, and they're moving all around the island and really getting great feedback. Other events that the office has recently participated in: the Ko'olau Poko Resilience Review, a really important aspect of the work, was held on April 17th. And then, of course, we talked about the Earth Day press conference already. As far as upcoming events, myself and Dr. Fox will be at an event with the Department of Parks and Recreation and the Trees for Honolulu's Future organization at Pololo District Park from 9 to noon. And that'll involve a tree planting and some community work in the park, and all are welcome. Our office will also be at the 2025 ACECH Symposium, and Chair Islam, I'll see if I can challenge you to help me remember what that acronym stands for, but it is a group of engineers that we're going to be speaking to, and there'll be quite a few folks from the city there, so we'll be sharing some of our office's work. That concludes my director's report. Happy to take any questions, and really excited to be here with you today.
Awesome, Ben. Always such a great report to give us. You guys are busy. And so I just want to say, continue the great work. Welcome, Cross. We've had a chance to start working with you, and so lovely to have you in the office. A lot of good stuff. I did see the social media blast for the Earth Day celebration, and then the new sort of PV array and batteries at the Blaisdell. So really exciting to sort of see that. I think I read that it's going to support 100% of the energy demand. Is that correct?
So the statement that was made is 100% of the daytime load. So obviously that is a facility that runs at night as well, and the battery will help that, but it's not going to necessarily support all the load.
Got it. But that's exciting to see for sure. And then I know we will have an update probably in our June meeting on the annual report more in depth. But I just wanted to note and give you guys great congratulations, because I think it will segue to our next discussion. But the water consumption reduction. I know that's becoming sort of top of mind to a lot of communities and even to counties on how do we begin to have more, I don't want to say stringent, but start to look at our potable water reuse and then the value of reuse, really what that infrastructure looks like. So I was really excited to hear that. I'm going to turn it over to my other commissioners for any questions or comments to Director Sullivan. Vice Chair Osuka.
Hi, Ben. Thank you, as always, for such a great update. You shared so much with us. I just want to ask a couple of things. One, you mentioned the city has now generated more of its own energy, and I just want to clarify, is that solar rooftop mostly and/or now battery storage, or did I hear that wrong? Just want to ask about that specifically.
There's only a limited number of battery storage. The Blaisdell Center
Okay.
is actually one of the first facilities we put batteries at. And yes, it is all primarily either rooftop or solar canopy type installations that we're getting that energy from. We obviously also have the H power plant, but that wasn't included in the data we were talking about because that's sold directly to PECO.
Okay, that's helpful. And then just one more question, Chair, if I could. Or just request maybe. I was hoping for our next meeting, you folks could bring a flyer or just remind folks our next meeting's in person in Waianae. I know that the registration numbers are quite low for the Waianae CAP meeting, so if you could bring a flyer for the Waianae CAP meeting, or just make a quick announcement at the meeting, that would be great.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I am dropping the overall announcements on all of those island-wide meetings just for the flyer into the chat just now.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Osuka. Great reminder to bring information on the CAP in the Waianae community. Any other comments, questions from commissioners to Director Sullivan? Commissioner Romine?
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm sorry about the technological challenges, my startup, but I'm here now. No questions or comments. I just want to say thank you, Director Sullivan, for the updates. And since you can hear me now, welcome, Commissioner Ma. It's good to see you, and I appreciate you being willing to join us on the commission. It's nice to see you again. That's all. Thank you.
Great. I guess one thing, Ben, I forgot to add in my comments. I'm so happy you brought up Bill 15. Do you know when it's being heard again? It's probably for its third reading, right, with council?
You know, it would have posted actually, I believe it did post last night, and
Okay.
it will be at the Budget Committee on Tuesday at 9 a.m. I will rely on my team members to see if somebody can grab the link and drop that in the chat as well for people's awareness.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, any comments from the public to Director Sullivan on his updates? Cross, do we have any in the room? Or any online? Nope. All right, thank you, Maya. Okay. Go ahead, Director Sullivan.
As I apologize, as I often do, I remember one thing I forgot to say, and I'd like to bring it back because it was a really important one. So we did mention the food art contest, and I think one of the things I wanted to share with commissioners, I think you already know, is that food insecurity is just a huge issue on Oahu. And you know, this is a citywide food drive at this moment that's also going on, and we're getting involved in that. But I encourage folks to look at the annual sustainability report as well as the food bank's recent reports to really understand the depth of this problem. What they're saying is it's really at the same levels as it was during the worst of COVID. So it's an issue that just none of us can ignore, and we really got to figure out how to amplify our efforts, especially given the possibility of additional federal cuts on these kind of programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sullivan, for bringing it up. I know there is a bill right now that's moving through conference. I think it's getting voted on very soon on just beefing up that framework, right, for our food security in the islands. Vice Chair Osuka.
Oh, just really quick, Ben, can I request that when your office is done with your food plan that maybe Jason or someone else make a presentation at the commission?
Absolutely. We can put that on the docket. It may be a little ways out still, but we'll be happy to do that.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Osuka. Okay. Thank you again, Director Sullivan, for all the great work. I hope the remaining days of Earth Month are of success to your team and you find some well-rested need after those events. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next item, which is agenda item number 6, which is a presentation on the City and County of Honolulu Benchmarking Program by Marissa Kunsch. Welcome, Marissa. So happy to have you here to talk about the benchmarking program. I know Ben shared an update in our March meeting, and I know that you guys are well in your second reporting cycle. So we're really excited to sort of get more updates on the progress of the benchmarking program. But I want to turn it over to you now to maybe share some news on that program.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm doing a quick audio check, maybe a thumbs up if you can hear me okay.
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear. You sound great.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. Well, thanks for the intro. I'm really excited to be presenting on the benchmarking program today as well. So thanks for having our team. I'm Marissa Kunsch, the Energy Program Manager here at the Resilience Office. So just jump right in. We are currently in year 3 of the Better Buildings Benchmarking Program with over, just checking if slides are.
No, I was just going to ask, do you want to share any slides, Marissa? There we go. I think Director Sullivan is assisting with that. Perfect.
There we go. Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Okay, great. Yeah, so currently in year 3, so over 1,500 buildings are being required to report their annual electric, gas, and water data by June 30th this year. The program has already evolved quite a bit since year 1, especially as we're increasing compliance numbers year after year and improving on data accuracy and even access to building data. So today's presentation, I'm going to provide a quick refresher on the benchmarking requirements and timeline for buildings, current reporting numbers and data that we've collected to date, and then some next steps that buildings can take to understand their building's energy and water usage. So shown here is our implementation timeline. In July of 2022, Mayor Blangiardi signed into law Ordinance 2217, known as the Better Buildings Benchmarking Program, which requires all buildings to report previous calendar year data for electric, gas, and water by June 30th. So we have 3 tiers of building sizes that are required to comply. In 2023, we started with buildings 100,000 square feet and above. Last year, we had buildings 50,000 square feet and above. And then this year, we'll have all buildings 25,000 square feet and above required to report. So this is the first year that we have all buildings in all 3 tiers reporting. Also in a parallel effort, we have our city municipal buildings over 10,000 square feet that are required to submit similar data by Earth Day of every year. So that's published in our annual sustainability report. So really excited about the rollout of this program. We've had some bumps in the road, but overall, we're in a really good place today. And each year we see our compliance numbers increasing, which is really exciting. So for buildings who are required to comply, every year we publish something called a covered buildings list on our website. So this will include a building's name, their address, and a unique Oʻahu building ID that's required to be submitted with their report. So buildings can check on our website if they're required to comply. And this is our largest year yet. We anticipate it to be our most difficult, challenging year, given the smaller buildings are typically harder to reach and maybe often have less resources to dedicate to completing the report. But alone this year, we have 700 newly added buildings who are reporting for the first time. But our office offers a variety of resources, help resources, including webinars, one-on-one phone calls. So lots of support there, but a big year ahead of us. So next slide then. And once we collect a building's data, once they successfully complete their report, we publish the building's data here on our transparency map. So this is an interactive map that's on our benchmarking website. So you can kind of scroll around, see which buildings are in compliance, which are out of compliance. If a building is in compliance, the data that we publish includes a building's name, the building type, the square footage of the building's energy use intensity and water use intensity, building's Energy Star score, and then the amount of greenhouse gas emissions from that building. So all of this is only reported, again, if they're fully in compliance. So I would say that's kind of a barrier we experience, is just getting a building to first submit their report on time, but second, just including all of the data that's required in the report for their building. So each building is required to report whole building usage. So each building and the building ID that's being reported, the data includes all tenants in a given building. So that's both commercial or residential. So for example, in large condo buildings, if tenants are individually metered, you might have hundreds of residential meters that are in a building that needs to be reporting. So we knew this program wouldn't be a success unless we made it easy to gather that full building data. So we've worked really closely with HECO to be able to easily offer whole building electric data, which has been a huge win and kind of a couple of years in the making, but we're excited to be able to offer aggregate electric usage data to buildings who have several commercial or several residential meters. And just in the last year, we've made it even easier for buildings to access this data. So it was previously being offered through an email request to HECO, but this year we have a platform available where a building can easily just download their aggregate data, and it's transferred directly to their Energy Star Portfolio Manager account, which is where they report their data. So it takes about 5 minutes in total for a building to be able to access that data, which is just huge and we're really excited about. So this platform is in its second year of use, and it's already increased building compliance and saved significant staff hours from both HECO and our city side to provide individual data spreadsheets to customers. So really, really awesome win there. More about the transparency map, it's just providing huge opportunities for buildings to compare their year-over-year usage. So published on the map here, we have 2023 data that's reported, as well as 2024 data. Next year, we'll be providing 2025 data. So you can kind of flip through the years and be able to see, if a building is increasing their usage over time, decreasing, but really it's just kind of valuable data to the building to be able to take accountability as well, and just kind of see where their energy spend is going. So buildings can compare to neighbor buildings, buildings of a similar size, and it also allows for utilities and other government agencies to be able to really review this data, see what kind of programs are needed to help possibly aging buildings or lower income buildings to be able to save energy. So also in this map, just kind of some quick numbers of what we're seeing in compliance. Our 2023 compliance, we had about 500 buildings who were required to report. And of the 500, we had 70% who had submitted a report. And then last year, we had roughly almost 600 buildings we were required to report, and we received 52% of those reports. So this year, again, it's our largest year, but really, really looking forward to increasing those compliance numbers. Oh, and one more thing to mention about the transparency map. There's a downloadable spreadsheet that goes along with this map. So you can download the data on a Google Sheet or download it as an Excel file. So you can kind of review the highest energy users, lowest water as well. And then of the data that's reported, 175 buildings are condo buildings, which is our highest building sector, our condos. The next highest are hotels. We have 35 hotels that have reported, 30 offices, and then 11 senior care facilities. Our top three kind of reporting sectors are condos, hotels, and offices. I think that's all on the transparency map. Then we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And so once a building completes their benchmarking report, their data is goes on the live transparency map. But a building also gets an individual performance scorecard. So this is kind of a small carrot incentive for a building to complete their report. But they get this report that shows their usage compared to other buildings of a similar type. So older condos are compared with older condos, hotels with hotels within similar square footage tiers. But it's kind of like letting them know that if they're above average consumers of water or energy or higher than typical users. So this is really valuable data, kind of just lets you know where you are, how you're doing compared to your neighbors. But ultimately, it's relying on those who have also reported. So that's why one of our biggest goals is just increasing our compliance numbers. That way we can better be able to see like for like comparison. So these scorecards are really valuable, not just for a building, but again, also for a lot of stakeholders that we work with, such as Hawaii Energy. The energy advisors at Hawaii Energy really see value in these scorecards. They can take them straight to a building, walk through the building with them, and be able to see what are some opportunities for energy savings for the building and like for water as well. So scorecards are kind of a good just starting point for a building to be able to manage and then further reduce their energy consumption over time. And a really common question we get is, you know, where's this data going? What's the point of doing this report? But, you know, just kind of seeing these performance scorecards and seeing the data on the transparency map, this is the opportunity, and this is really where we can see kind of a step towards market transformation and future efficiency opportunities. I mentioned before, it really helps build different government programs, and including city programs. So a kind of a parallel program that our office is working on is an affordable green housing retrofit program. So we're able to kind of like look at this benchmarking data and see, you know, what aging buildings kind of need the most help, and then where the city can step in and other available programs to help with retrofit installations, especially as we have a lot of state rebates available for different types of retrofits. And we do currently have federal incentives as well. Unknown where those will be in the future, but the goal of the program is really to tie together all of these currently available funding opportunities, tied together with financing, other green bank offers, and then help reduce building energy use over time with those retrofits. So data is being utilized by our office, really being utilized by different partners we work with. A lot of folks have a lot of questions on the data that's reported, so it really has just kind of sparked conversation with buildings and then with partners. It's really exciting to see all of the reported data coming out. But also gives me a moment to just really give credit to a lot of the partners that we do work with to make this program a success. So definitely the electric utility, Hawaiian Electric, Board of Water Supply, Hawaii Gas. We have an influx of buildings who are requesting data for their building if they don't have their water bill on hand, or they can't sign into their gas account online. So the utilities really are seeing an influx of questions on their utility data as well. So want to credit them. And then Hawaii Energy, they've been a really great partner, kind of offering a next step support for buildings who are interested in learning more about where their energy spend is going, as well as Board of Water Supply. So we've also been working with various building associations and different building stakeholders who support our compliance numbers and really give feedback to, how the program is working, or where we could make areas for improvement. So we also hold our own annual trainings each year. But overall, we've grown a lot. This third year is going to be our biggest year yet, but definitely looking to work even closer with our partners to keep the compliance numbers increasing. So right now it's a really busy season for us, but we have a really great team, great partners, and we know how meaningful this work is, and what's the first step for a building to manage their energy use and their costs, and then reduce their consumption over time. So maybe next slide then. We'll end here. So all buildings and then everyone on this call is welcome to visit our benchmarking website. And we offer help desk service to buildings who do have questions about their reports. So it's free to get this help desk service. Just have to email us. We're always there to support, and excited for years to come. This is kind of a quick snapshot of where we are today with the Better Buildings Benchmarking Program.
Great. What a wonderful update, Marissa. Thank you so much. I'm excited to sort of see the data come in June, to see all the covered buildings, and to sort of see that trend. I did have a moment to kind of dive into your portal, and I noticed, and I'm really happy that you mentioned that of the multifamily housing, that seems to be the biggest lot of building types in this study, that 175 of them are owned condos. I would be curious to sort of understand like the difference performance between the rental and the condos, because sometimes those rental meters are sort of built in, depending on how they meet their meter, whether it's a single or separate individual meters, could all be folded in. And so it'd be interesting to just see the use patterns. And then just on this multifamily, I'm curious to know where the office plans to further dissect this information, if they're wanting to sort of look at then showing trends within each building type to then encourage better efficiency, whether it's in the energy or the water sector, because I do think this information is very useful, particularly as we talk about, energy code use, energy codes, water consumption, right? And then paralleling that with some industry sort of design information of how predicted building use would look like at a particular time horizon. So I'm just curious really of how this data will be further used. And then the second real big question is the water use intensity. I'm really happy that this is being shown there are very few studies out there that actually talk about water use intensity. I think the EPA Energy Star Portfolio Manager is the only one out there so far. And so I don't know if the city has reached out to other cities who are also benchmarking water to see if there are trends between building types, right? And then usage patterns. Because I do think that's an opportunity for us to further build into understanding really what that use looks like by the building type, by the user type, and then to understand what are some practical next steps of reducing potable water usage. So those are my comments, Marissa, but I'm really glad to sort of see this information.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Really great questions. I'd say for the first one, kind of, you know, what are the next steps for us to using this data? I think our office has already kind of taken advantage with just building out our retrofits program, just designing the program, but mostly it's working with our partners. We work closely with Hawaii Energy, who uses this data probably every day to be able to communicate with their buildings and offer it as a next step to possibly doing a walkthrough of their building, doing an energy audit, and then even looking a little bit closer at a building and what they've already completed. So Hawaii Energy might be able to see if a building is sub-metered or if they're master metered, and if they're not already sub-metered, then potentially encouraging them to install sub-meters and encourage kind of tenant level energy efficiency. So those are kind of our first steps, is working closely with our partners, but also one of our priorities right now is further designing our retrofit program in the city. As well as for water, great point as well. I think other cities, different cities with their different benchmarking programs, they have different requirements for compliance, and actually not all programs require water reporting. So I think it's really valuable that our program does require water reporting. But that being said, we haven't yet compared with other cities and what their water trends are, but I think that's a really, really great idea, and definitely something that our office could work more closely with Board of Water Supply on, just kind of seeing those trends compared to other cities. So I appreciate that comment and thought.
Great. I do know, I'll just share in our modeling, right, so that we do in the design profession, depending on the modeling tool you use, there is kind of some predicted water usage that we can extract out. So it would be interesting to see, especially when there are new buildings that come online, right? And there are very few new buildings that are coming online that are reporting, to sort of see that parallels. Is the predicted actually the same as or the actual actually the same as the predicted? But I think getting some of this data, you know, working maybe in cooperation with the city would just be helpful in understanding patterns. But yes, great report, and please continue the good work. I'm going to open up to commissioners, and I see Commissioner Olson has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I was having fun digging into your website while you were talking, and I think these data will be so useful. In one obvious place is we're currently writing a guidance document about tourism and climate change, and we've been collecting information on water and on energy use. So this is going to help us tremendously. So thank you for compiling it. I have two main questions. You know, I think a lot of times partners are asked to report the same thing to different parties. And so I'm wondering, and you mentioned that you are, you know, really coordinating with Hawaii Electric and the Board of Water Supply, but I wonder if there's a way forward where there's a centralized system where all the data feeds in without asking hotels and commercial buildings, et cetera, to report to a lot of different areas, right? Just trying to streamline these data so it's accessible to the public, analyzable, and doesn't overburden the operators of these buildings with yet another reporting requirement, and whether we've kind of thought of that centralizing of reporting and data management. So that's question one. The second question relates to kind of what we do with the data. So I was going through it, and you've facilitated, I mean, you've made it incredibly easy, you know, with all the technical support to enter the data and to find programs. Like I was clicking, I'm like, oh, good, residential programs for water, you know, use efficiency, right? All centralized. But behavior change, we've seen that being able to look at your performance as opposed to your neighbors or your similar properties can be really persuasive. I wonder if there's plans to do something like that with these data where it takes, yeah, behavior change kind of lens to it. But in any case, thank you so much for this effort, and you will be hearing from me after this meeting to connect. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much for those questions as well. I think to answer the first question, you know, different, the variety of partners we have and buildings, like maybe that's a barrier to compliance is it's just confusing how to report or working with too many reporting platforms. But that is one of the biggest reasons we've worked as close with the utilities is we have been to be able to streamline it as much as we can. Definitely a question we get from buildings is, you know, if you're working closely with the utilities, then how come you can't just get our data and do it for us? But one of the biggest things that our office cannot do, and something that the utilities don't have, is all of these building details that the report requires, which includes the age of the building, the use type, and a lot of kind of sort of back-end details that go along with a building's use type. So there's kind of specific questions for a hospital and specific questions for a condo building that really help build out the reason that a building might be performing the way it is. So all of those are centralized in a single reporting platform, and then being able to report it on the transparency map for all of our partners to see helps streamline it a bit. But I do think, you know, there's definitely opportunities to work more closely with the utilities and just make kind of the data access portion even easier. So appreciate that thought. And then I think I would love to talk more kind of on the next steps and comparing like the local comparisons. So maybe I can put my email here in the chat as well to further connect. There we go. Oh, and then I see a question here in the chat.
I think, Marissa, we'll go to all the commissioners and then we'll go to the public comments, if that's okay.
Perfect. Apologies.
Thank you. No problem. Vice Chair Osuka.
Hi, Marissa. Thanks for your great presentation. Kirsten stole my first question about why not just go directly to like HECO and BWS for that information. So thanks for providing additional clarity on that. I just wanted to provide a comment and just say I think this is really great. I'm particularly happy that we're providing this information publicly so everybody can have access to this information. And then I also just want to say, as a non-buildings expert person, I really like the scorecard. I think that's really accessible and a really easy way for someone who's not an expert in this area to understand energy, water use, et cetera, relative to our neighbors. But also I think the cost savings portion is really important. And I also would like to understand Howard's question also. But I think in our work, something I've heard from folks is that like a concept like greenhouse gas emissions is just really intangible and really hard for folks to grasp, especially if people are just focused on surviving and getting by. So I think I'm trying, in my work anyway, I'm trying to incorporate things like cost savings or cost of living and like the work I do in addition to what are the climate benefits or risks of the work we're doing. So I just wanted to say I really appreciate the scorecard as a means of accessibility for folks who are not in this sector. And then also including the cost savings, I think is really important. So thanks, Marissa.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Ma.
Hi, Marissa. Thank you for that really informative presentation. A lot of the other commissioners have asked questions and you've answered the questions I have. I just have two others, and I apologize if you've already answered these during your presentation and I just missed it. I have a question about why the fall off in compliance between your 2 years, and also what happens if people don't comply?
Great questions. I would say the reason that the compliance numbers have fallen off in 2023 compared to 2024 is mostly because as we decrease our building tier size, it's becoming more and more challenging for a building to complete their report. Typically, the larger buildings have more resources, they have more staff time to dedicate to completing the report, and they have more access to the information. It might be more readily available. So definitely as we get to the smaller buildings and the building management team is much smaller, it's definitely more burdensome and more challenging for them to complete it. So this year we've really been focusing more on what types of outreach can we do to better educate buildings, and what kind of additional help desk services can we provide to really support a building and answer any questions they have, and ultimately make it as easy as we can for them to complete the report. But the answer there is really just the smaller building sizes are more challenging. So I think as we roll in the 25,000 square foot buildings this year, we definitely see that as our most challenging year ahead. And then your second question, what happens if the building does not comply? The ordinance includes fines and penalties for a building that does not comply. Our first couple years in the program, we've kind of chosen a route of educating a building first and really kind of softening the kind of the learning curve, because the first couple of years of the program, it's not only new to a building, but it's new to the utilities, it's new for the public. So the first couple of years, we have gone the route of more educational and learning rather than imposing the fines and penalties. But the ordinance does include fines and penalties. So in future years, if that's something we need to pursue, then it's there. But at least for now, just to make the program as streamlined as we can and as easy to complete as we can, we've just more taken the educational approach for building.
Thank you. If I may, can I have a follow-up?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Chair?
Oh, sorry. Please do, Commissioner Ma. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Marissa, so I wasn't quite sure. So for the first year the program was in place and people or buildings complied, they are still going to respond in the second year and third year going forward. Yes?
That's correct. So as soon as a building is required to comply for their first year, it's now an annual reporting requirement. So every year by June 30th, a building will submit their previous calendar year data. So the buildings that are, we're in the 100,000 square foot tier, this year they'll be submitting for the third year in a row.
Got
But
it.
for the building's 25,000 square foot, yeah, it'll be their first time.
Got it. Thanks so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Ma. You brought up a great question about the 25,000 and under. Marissa, have you guys reached out to BOMA? Because I know those buildings 25,000 and under typically don't have a dedicated building operator. They're commonly managed by property managers. So all of this information can sometimes get lost. So I wonder if that organization can assist, or even design professionals who are helping, either retrofitting or designing these new buildings that are under that square footage, then at least try and maybe tee up the owner and the property manager for this, upcoming disclosure in that next full year of occupancy.
That's a great point. We're definitely working closely with as many building stakeholders and partners as we can. And in the last couple of years, we've been really lucky to work closely with BOMA and even provide presentations to their different quarterly meetings. So we're working with IREM. We've worked with different condo association groups, different engineering groups within the hotel sector. So we're doing a lot of kind of sector-specific outreach, but I think definitely BOMA has a lot of resources and a lot of access to those building managers, like you mentioned. So I think definitely continuing to work with them is a goal for sure.
Great, glad you guys are collaborating. If there are no other comments from our commissioners, Commissioner Ryan, do you have any comments you'd like to share?
Well, I do have a question, actually.
Okay.
Thanks for the opportunity. And it's maybe showing my ignorance just a little bit, but residential renters usually pay your water, electricity costs. Now you're working with the building managers, the property owners on the reporting. How do you bridge? But it may be really the tenant occupants that would be the most motivated to reduce their energy usage, right? Because that's where they would see the cost savings. How do you bridge that outreach? Maybe are you talking to the tenants and occupants as well? And do you think how do you reach the folks that really would see the cost savings there, that they really can make the most effective reductions? Am I onto something there? Is that how it kind of works?
That's a great question. And I think, kind of the purpose of the benchmarking program is really just a starting point to how much energy is a building currently using, and then kind of the next steps to energy savings. We work closely with Hawaii Energy, they're the state's energy efficiency program, and provide rebates and incentives for different energy efficiency projects, LED lighting and efficient ACs, all that. So I would say working closely with them, they kind of take those next steps to look at tenant level use. But sometimes the challenge there is that tenants don't always have access to their individual usage. They might be billed amongst a master meter, and so they could be billed based on their square footage, not necessarily how much energy they're using. So sometimes that's just installing sub-meters so that a unit can be encouraged to save based on what they're actually using. So as far as encouraging kind of next level savings and reviewing at a tenant level, I would say that's something that Hawaii Energy has really worked on and continues to work on with tenants, and even providing tenant specific incentive programs. So they have a really awesome low cost lighting program for tenants. So if you meet a certain square footage threshold, you could get a low to no cost LED lighting retrofit for your facility. So I would say, yeah, Hawaii Energy is working closely on opportunities like that. But as far as the benchmarking standpoint, the program looks at each building as a building and access to that tenant-specific data and tenant-specific opportunity. It's kind of rolled up in the whole building. A part of that is just to protect tenant level data. So that was a big concern from buildings when we were first doing our outreach for the program a couple of years ago. You know, different units didn't want their energy usage published. So that was something we worked on with HECO and even the Public Utilities Commission to have different, I would say, like account protections in place. So for buildings that have several electric meters, it's kind of rolled up into one reporting number for a building. I hope that answers
Great.
the question.
It does. It does. Thank you for being here today and the great presentation and the great discussion and all your hard work. Mahalo.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Ramay. Okay, we're going to move on to comments from the public. I'm going to first go to the chat because I know, Howard, you posted something early on. Howard, if you want to unmic yourself, maybe you want to share your comment, maybe expand on that. I can read it out loud. Is the 26,000 estimated savings yearly or lifetime? Marissa, perhaps you want to address that? I don't think Howard can unmute himself.
Yeah. Thanks, Howard, for the question. Those are annual potential savings for a building. So I would say that's just kind of one of the carrots on the scorecard for a building to kind of take the next step. And now that they have their data, they can see it on this scorecard. What are some more tangible opportunities can they do? So Hawaii Energy might step in and do a walkthrough of their building, notice that they could retrofit their lights, AC, central AC is a really big one. So it definitely kind of offers that next layer of questions the building might have and how they can see those monetary savings. But thanks for the question, Howard.
Great. Any other comments from the public? Maya, anything from our individual in the room or on Facebook Live? All right, I see none. Great. Well, thank you, Marissa. This is such a great presentation. I think the commission is very engaged in this, so we look forward to sort of seeing the reporting coming out from June 30th. But other than that, I think we'll all probably dive into the data, maybe send you some follow-up, but great work. I think the more information we get on energy use and water use, the more informed we are about the policies that we can make moving forward. So thank you again for the continued great work. I am going to move on to agenda item number 7, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Vice Chair Otsuka to do the introduction to our speaker.
Great. Aloha kakahiaka kako. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to quickly start before I introduce our speaker, Nate, that it's sort of Kirsten and I's intention. So Kirsten and I, are the co-chairs leading the climate change and tourism guidance document. Sort of our intention to bring you folks speakers that are helping to inform our revisions to the tourism and climate change guidance document. And so today's sort of our first go at that. So today we're going to talk more about the intersections of tourism, climate change, and invasive species. So with that, I wanted to introduce our speaker, Nate Dube. So Nate is the manager of the Oʻahu Invasive Species Committee, and I'll let him share a little bit more about what his organization does. He's been with, or it's OISC for short, he's been with OISC since 2012 and has been the manager since 2019. Nate also has a background in invasive species and ecology education from the University of Michigan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nate. Nate, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. If you have any issues sharing your screen, please let us know.
Thanks, Kiana. And thanks everybody for the opportunity. I do apologize in advance. I'm still battling a bit of a head cold, so I'm going to sound a little bit stuffy, but we'll do our best to get through this presentation here. So I will have an opportunity, some space in the presentation to discuss OISC, but please feel free to ask any questions at the end. And I will just jump in as soon as I can move this out of the way and hit presenter mode. Can you folks see that?
Yes, in full screen now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I wanted to come and again, thank you for the opportunity from all the commissioners to discuss the intersection of invasive species and climate change. There is a bigger push, I think, especially at the national level, to understand the nexus between invasive species and climate change. So today I'm going to go over a brief overview of invasive species. For a lot of you, it will probably be review, but it's good to get us all on the same page. I'll give a introduction about our organization and about the invasive species committees throughout the state. And then we'll talk a little bit about that nexus between invasive species and climate change, and then how it impacts tourism and tourism specific to the city and county of Honolulu. And then at the end, I just have a few recommendations, and then I'll be available for any questions that folks have. So when we're talking about invasive species, and I do want to mention that it is April is Native Hawaiian Plant Month, so happy Native Hawaiian Plant Month to everybody. We need to talk about native species, right? So there's two different types of native species that we have here in Hawaii. We have our endemic species that are found here naturally and nowhere else in the world. And then we have our indigenous species, which are found here and arrived here naturally, but also are present on other Pacific islands. Then we have non-native species, sometimes called alien species. Non-native species are not necessarily invasive. Typically, invasive species have some type of characteristics, whether that be regarding the species itself or some of the surrounding environmental factors that may magnify those species that make them invasive. So when we're talking about a non-native species and why they're considered invasive, we're really talking about four components. And do they check off whether or not they harm our native species or biodiversity is typically the first way that we think about an invasive species. You know, does an invasive weed come in and push out a lot of other native plants, or is an invasive algae coming in and smothering the reef? But there are other ways that invasive species can be harmful, because there are some species that harm our human health, like little fire ant, which we'll discuss a little bit later. Our quality of life, you know, maybe they produce loud, incessant calls throughout the night. And a lot of these invasive species impact our economy in a number of ways, whether that's the cost to mitigate the threats posed by those species, or whether that's direct cost to our economy from losses of crop yields or other aspects of that nature. And what makes them so good at being bad? Typically, the number one thing is they outcompete our native species for resources, but they can do that in a variety of ways. Typically, they reproduce much more quickly than our native species, and they also lack natural predators or enemies. So the other aspects of their home range or home habitat are not present to keep their population in check. So that allows them to their populations to explode and expand more rapidly. And also, typically in Hawaii, invasive species get here and they can thrive in a number of habitats. And in Hawaii, our habitats are so fruitful, and they can support so much that invasive species utilize all of their aspects of being invasive to really capitalize on that abundance of resources that we have here in Hawaii. So that was just a little bit about invasive species. I know I went a little quickly, so please feel free to ask questions at the end. But I did want to talk about our organization, the Oʻahu Invasive Species Committee, and we were founded in 2001. And what we are is a partnership of governmental and non-governmental agencies at the state, federal, municipal, county, and private level. And what we do is we really focus on incipient invasive species. As you may see in the news or have heard in discussions with other folks who are knowledgeable about invasive species, there are a lot of invasive species in Hawaii. So we really need to be specific about prioritizing which species we go after, because there are just not enough resources provided to us to really go after all of the invasive species. So we prioritize incipient species, or species that have not yet fully established. There is a little bit of flexibility in there if it's a really bad invasive species, and we know that eradication may not be possible. We still may take that on as a target species and work to contain that species in a specific region and try to prevent it from expanding either throughout Oahu or to our neighbor islands. And the way that we work is we are technically a management, or we're technically a research project through the University of Hawaii, but in reality, we're more of a management entity, and we send field staff every day out into the forest or into people's backyards to control some of these really high priority pests that have infiltrated our borders on Oahu and are wreaking havoc on our ecosystem and on people's livelihoods. So OISC is one of a number of other island invasive species committees through the University of Hawaii's Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit, and through RCUH. And there's an invasive species committee on most of the islands. So we've got the Big Island Invasive Species Committee, Maui Invasive Species Committee, Molokai, Oahu, and Kauai. And although we don't all work on the same exact species, because it depends on the status of a species in each county, we all work with the same goal in mind, which is to work towards eradication for these high priority incipient species, to protect our economy, to protect human health, to protect our ecosystems, and to protect the many threatened and endangered native species that we have here in Hawaii that are found nowhere else in the world. And so when we're talking about invasive species, we have to talk about the invasion curve. And the invasion curve talks about, or really it demonstrates kind of the timeline that you can expect for any kind of incursion from an invasive species. So the first step is prevention. That's the step that is the hardest to get folks to buy into and provide resources for, but it really is the most cost effective. And it's really the best shot we have at eradicating a species. Once a species does reach our island and get past our borders, there is a window for eradication. You know, if the population is small enough and we have enough resources and we have the correct tools and the correct research informing those tools, eradication is very possible. But the longer we wait, and the more that the population expands beyond what we're able to leverage at that population from a resource standpoint, the further we move into the curve until we get towards the containment stage, where eradication typically is no longer feasible. And unfortunately, this is usually where public awareness begins, is in the containment stage, which is not ideal. And one of the reasons that the ISCs and OISCs specifically have a really robust outreach and education system. Very active on social media, tabling at a lot of community events, presentations to schools and other community groups, really to make sure that folks know and understand the threats of invasive species. We provide information about identifying and reporting invasive species, and giving the community opportunities and avenues to help us in our fight against invasive species. And really one of the best ways for the community to do that is to be our eyes, because we can't be out there everywhere. So if folks suspect that they see a problematic high priority pest, we really encourage them to report that pest. And that's another additional layer of monitoring that we can utilize. Now, once we move past containment and containment's no longer feasible and an invasive species is widespread throughout the landscape, that's when we get into that long-term management of protection of resources or asset protection. And that's where we just have to live with the invasive species. And anytime we want to alleviate the consequences of those species, it's going to be costly and it's going to be in perpetuity. So really, our organization focuses on those first three stages, and we really try to prevent new species and high priority pests from getting to that fourth stage of asset protection, where it becomes typically on the homeowner or business owner the expense of controlling the species. So with that overview in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about the nexus between invasive species and climate change, because climate change is a threat multiplier for impacts from invasive species, and vice versa because of the impact that invasive species then have on climate resilience. You'll see similar graphics throughout this presentation to this one. This is from a paper that was published by the National Invasive Species Board, of which we have two really prolific conservation invasive species experts sitting on that board, Laura Brewington and Christy Martin. So I just wanted to make sure to recognize them for all their important and impactful work. But I wanted to go over some of the ways that invasive species and climate interact, right? And one of those ways that we typically think of first is that as the climate warms, it can shift species distribution. So up high in the mountains where there may be some limitations elevationally based on weather patterns, as the climate warms up, those conditions change and invasive species may infiltrate into those areas. So we think about certain invasive weeds are now showing up higher and higher in elevation in our native forests up near the summits and the Ko'olau and Waianae ranges. But climate change can also worsen the impacts of invasive species. So if we have a coconut rhinoceros beetle, which has been very popular in the news lately, unfortunately widespread on this island, but still eradicable on some of our neighbor islands. If we go through some type of drought and coconut trees and palms are suffering from drought, and then they're suffering from climate-induced drought, and then they're suffering from the impacts of the coconut rhinoceros beetle. That's like a double whammy for the coconut trees, right? So that's one clear example of how climate change can worsen the impacts of invasive species. Climate change can also facilitate the spread and establishment, right? So if we're thinking about if we're transitioning into the marine ecosystems, thinking about melting sea ice, that can open up new pathways for shipping. That increases the opportunity for invasive marine species to be picked up on hulls of ships or in ballast water and then deposited in our shores. It just opens up more opportunities for cargo as well. We know that inspections at our border are important, but we also know that, we also know that we don't have enough folks and we don't have enough resources at our borders providing biosecurity, and that some things will inevitably get past those borders. So increased opportunities. And then climate change makes ecosystems more susceptible to invasion. So if we're thinking about more frequent extreme storm impacts, that can open up new areas in the forest. And weeds are typically, non-native invasive weeds are typically the species that are going to repopulate areas that may have suffered from a landslide due to an extreme weather event. So those are just a few examples. There are more, but I wanted to then talk about how this interchange between climate change and invasive species specifically threatens tourism, because it can threaten tourism in both direct and indirect ways. So I think one of the first things we think about is ecotourism and recreation, right? And the consequences are pretty clear for that. If we have a species like Myconia, which we'll talk about in just a few slides, which is a really bad weed in the forest that exacerbates erosion, you're going to get more frequent washed out trails. Hiking is going to become more inaccessible. Or if we have folks visiting the island, visiting the city and county of Honolulu, wanting to do some marine recreation, maybe some snorkeling, invasive algae spread, that can really smother a reef and make a place not very, it can make a place not very popular, I guess, for snorkeling, because it will reduce the abundance and diversity of our marine life and the species that folks are really going out there to see. Nobody wants to go diving in a bed of leather mudweed. But invasive species also impact infrastructure. So transportation is threatened. Lodging is threatened. If you have a species like little fire ant that can infest, furniture, can infest a bedroom, you're talking about lodging for folks. It can easily infest a hotel room. An entire colony of little fire ant can live in the size of a walnut shell. And it delivers an incredibly painful sting that can leave welts lasting up to weeks. And again, we can have washouts from roads, from invasive species. You think about albizia trees, which are those really tall trees that you can see in Manoa, falling on power lines, interrupting the power grid. So invasive species are really impacting our infrastructure as well as our ecosystem and kind of the attractions based in ecotourism. They can also impact our supply chain, right? We know how much we depend on shipping to bring a lot of the goods, and a lot of those goods are propping up the tourism industry here. So if we have interruptions, whether that be because of increased mitigation costs for the shipping companies, if they have to deal with more invasive algae, or they have other restrictions placed upon them because of ballast water and biofouling, that's going to impact our tourism industry in a little bit more of an indirect way, but it's a way that is really important for tourism. And then we have our food security, and invasive species is a pretty massive threat to our agricultural system. And so a lot of the agricultural products that folks get while they're here, the things that they want to bring back home, locally grown products, and some of the food that we grow here is all threatened by invasive species. So these are all direct impacts from invasive species. And then when you think about it from the perspective of climate change becoming a threat magnifier, it really exacerbates the problem. So that is why there's this big push from invasive species folks to make sure that we're including invasive species messaging when we talk about climate change, and vice versa, including the effects of climate change and the expected threats of climate change when we're talking about strategies for mitigating our invasive species. So I wanted to go over just a few case studies. We'll go over the coqui frog, Myconia, and little fire ant. And again, I just want to think about these impacts from not only the tourism lens, but how climate change can then exacerbate some of these impacts, right? So we talked a little bit about little fire ant. Not only does it infest homes and vehicles, but it can be really problematic in outdoor areas. We've seen beaches on Hawaii Island completely shut down for months because of little fire ant infestations. Imagine if that happened in Waikiki. That would definitely have a lasting impact on tourism. It also is known to lower our agricultural crop yields because of two main reasons. One of them being workers aren't going to want to work in fields where they're constantly getting stung by this tiny ferocious insect. But also because these ants are known to farm other pests like aphids, which also negatively impact crops. And then if you talk about Myconia, one of the worst weed species in the world, an excessive promoter of erosion and landslides, stormwater runoff. It diverts a lot of water away from our aquifer. So in terms of water quality security, it's going to be a huge problem, especially when we think about losing our ohia trees to rapid ohia death, and this species being the most likely to replace ohia in the landscape. So not only does it impact our livelihoods as residents and the experience of visitors from a water quality and abundance standpoint, it also impacts the outdoor ecotourism, hiking, And it also impacts some infrastructure in terms of potentially causing flooding and landslides that could impact roadways and thoroughfares. And we also know that, especially with weed species out in the forest, hikers become a massive vector of spread. While Myconia is spread by a number of bird species as well, the seeds are so tiny and can get stuck in just the smallest amount of mud on a hiking shoe, that we also have to think about how visitors are potentially becoming a vector of the spread and worsening this problem, which is why our organization focuses a lot on decontamination and making sure that all hiking gear and outdoor recreation equipment is sanitized properly before moving, especially to a new area in the island or between islands. And then coqui frog. Coqui frog is widely abundant on Hawaii Island, as is little fire ant, as is Myconia. And we're trying to stop all three of these from becoming widely established here on Oahu because we've seen what happens over there. And in terms of coqui frog, if you've ever been to Hilo in the evening, you can hear the calls. And while some folks over there have gotten used to the calls, they can be a real turnoff to visitors. They call loudly throughout the evening. They lower real estate values as well, which would have an indirect impact on our tourism industry in terms of what folks are willing to pay for lodging in certain areas. And they disrupt our ecosystem services. This is an aspect of coqui frogs that folks don't typically think about. They're a voracious predator of insects, and they don't differentiate between native or invasive alien insects. And if we lose too many insects, as we are globally losing quite a bit of our insect species, ecosystem functions like pollination and things that are really important for a number of our lives are going to be interrupted, and that's definitely going to have an impact on tourism. From the Myconia standpoint, I just wanted to show a visual. This is an area where we know there are a few Myconia trees, and we have a model of spread that indicates what would happen if we were unable to remove these trees from the watershed and how bad it would get. So when you're thinking about climate changing, the conditions worsening, and making the impacts of Myconia worse, and you're also thinking about all of the characteristics Myconia has and all the negative impacts and harm that Myconia can cause onto our tourism industry, it's important to think about how this plant would spread. So after year 5, if we were unable to remove these plants from the watershed, the 6 or so plants that we identified would multiply significantly, and after 10 years, they would blanket an area. And this is a little bit of what we're seeing in Hawaii Island with Myconia. So it's really important. We use this model to tell stories, but also to demonstrate to funders and to policymakers just how important controlling Myconia and the Myconia and other invasive weeds are. And then I think when we talk about invasive species, we have to talk about the cost, because just like climate change, adaptation efforts, and resilience, the cost of invasive species is quite staggering, and it's going to continue to grow exponentially. So globally, we're looking at 423 billion a year. Annual costs are going to quadruple each decade. North America skyrocketed from about $2 billion per year in the 60s to about 26 billion per year in the 2010s, and with a total of $1.26 trillion between 1960 and 2017. And then when we shift that focus locally, the Hawaii Invasive Species Council produced a report, and as of 2021, just brown tree snake, which is not here but has decimated Guam, Myconia, and little fire ant were projected to cost the state over $3 billion. And that's just across 3 species. And then if you take the flip side of that, they suggested that it would only cost $37 million a year to prevent this over $3 billion a year in costs. Unfortunately, we are not anywhere near that $37 million benchmark of investment from any of our funders. And so, as you might see in the news, we're losing the battle to invasive species across a number of fronts. And when you then think about the impacts from those invasive species from the lens of climate change magnifying those impacts, and then those invasive species then making climate resilience and adaptation efforts more difficult. It's really a big problem that we need to address substantially. The good news is we have some ideas, right? And so this paper by Laura Brewington and Christy Martin does suggest a few more broad level solutions, right? And so, again, these are ways that invasive species threaten climate change, adaptation, and resilience. So we have to make sure that policy at the county level, as well as at the state and federal level, but especially at the county level, is addressing this intersection and this relationship between invasive species and climate change and climate resilience efforts, right? So we know that the nexus of these two things threatens sustainability, cultural resources, coastal communities' resilience, especially. It degrades our infrastructure, both our green infrastructure and our man-made infrastructure, human-built infrastructure. And the causes to ecosystem function are quite staggering. One example that should definitely always be in our minds is Lahaina. The wildfire that happened in Lahaina was ignited by a pretty vast amount of invasive grasses that are known to be fire fuels that were identified as fire fuels. And even that area, some invasive species experts had already put out peer-reviewed publications indicating that this was a huge threat to that area, into any area with that level of an abundance of fountain grass and other invasive grasses that fuel wildfire. Here on Oʻahu, we have an abundance of fountain grass near Diamond Head, as well as on the leeward side of the island. So it's definitely something we need to keep in mind, especially as climate continues to warm. We predict more droughts in our changing climate, and more spread from fountain grass moving forward. And so some of the recommendations that they had for the federal level, because this paper was published from the perspective of the National Invasive Species Council, is to make sure that we're incorporating invasive species language into climate change. And then, of course, vice versa, including climate change adaptation guidance and invasive species strategy and invasive species documentation moving forward. Definitely increasing the networks. And this is something that would be a great step for us at the county level, is increasing these regional networks and programs between climate change resiliency groups and invasive species groups. I don't think that there's really a strong network there yet. So that's a really important step. And making sure that when we do actually get out into the field, boots on the ground, and integrate climate resiliency efforts, that we're also keeping in mind the invasive species management and prevention efforts because of the close relationship between the two. And of course, early detection and rapid response is critical and crucial to eradication of any species that do make it past our borders. And then money, right? We need to increase investments not only for climate resilience efforts, but also for invasive species efforts. So I wanted to hone in on three main recommendations moving forward. One is incorporate invasive species messaging into county level climate resiliency and adaptation guidance. That's something that I've been working with Kiana on for that tourism guidance document from the county, from the city and county. So that solution is moving forward. Increasing county level investments for invasive species management in tandem with climate resiliency investments. An investment in invasive species management is also an investment in climate resiliency. We do get some money at the Ko'olau Mountain Watershed Partnership and at our organization OISC from the Board of Water Supply, which is great. But we also have neighbor islands whose county, for example, Maui County, provides over $1 million a year just for little fire ant to the Maui Invasive Species Committee. So trying to increase some of those investments would definitely help with climate resiliency in tandem with helping invasive species management. And then just making sure that we're strengthening our partnerships between climate resiliency groups and invasive species management groups operating at the city and county level. I think this is something that really there's not a lot of overlap between the two. And I think that's something that can be improved upon fairly quickly and will have a lasting effect when we're coming together and working in partnership. And yeah, I just want to wrap it up with a thank you to all of our partners and funders and let you know how you folks can contact us. And so I will leave it there. And if folks want to ask questions, I'm happy to answer.
Great. Thank you, Nate. Especially I know you're not feeling well, so thanks for taking the time. That was a wealth of information. And I know I had asked the previous co-chairs of this guidance document to include more information about invasive species. And we briefly touched on essentially spread of invasive species via hiking, but I thought it would be great to ask you for some insight because I think the issue is much broader as you shared. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to turn it back over to Melanie to ask if the commissioners or the public have any questions. And then I can close this out after we're done with that.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Osuga. Nate, this was an excellent presentation, such a wealth of information. I think it was really great for you to kind of give a broad overview. And I know there's a lot of things that were discussed. A couple of things that come to mind is kind of like the early indicators, right? I don't know if in the studies and the reports that you've been doing, if you've been identifying kind of very clear pathways in which these invasives are being introduced to the islands. And then the second thing I thought was really useful and kind of one of the main, I think, goals or points that will probably come out of the tourism paper is the impacts to quality of life and quality of experience. I think those are untangible things, but they directly sort of impact our day-to-day life and our economy. So it was great that you touched upon that. The question, I guess, back to Kiana, Kirsten, is I don't know if those are things that will also be kind of investigated in the paper. But my main question to you, Nate, is about early indicators. What are those pathways that you've identified and how is that potentially being managed currently?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do critical control points, right? We investigate ways in which invasive species are being introduced and ways that they're moving once they're introduced. So one of the major pathways that we've identified for both little fire ant and coqui frog is through the plant nursery industry, right? We have a lot of nurseries on the windward side of this island. A lot of those nurseries do import plants from Hawaii Island. And unfortunately, we don't have enough inspectors at the ports of entry to really catch all of the infestations. So we've been working for a number of years now with the Department of Agriculture, both to try and support them and help them build up their capacity for more inspectors, but also from a regulatory standpoint. Our organization has no regulatory authority. And actually, right now, the only entity that does have regulatory authority over invasive species is the Department of Agriculture. So we worked with them to implement changes and revisions to the Chapter 70 4-72 Hawaii HAR, Hawaii Administrative Rules, to really try and address the spread of these high priority pests through nursery pathways, because the Department of Agriculture had indicated that they didn't feel from a legal standpoint that the chapter had enough teeth. So those revisions were passed, and so we should have a little bit stronger of a regulatory arm regarding invasive species, as well as the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. And I know this starts to get confusing with the acronyms, but the Hawaii Invasive Species Council is a state entity that is also semi-autonomous, although it's housed within the DLNR. It's made up of representatives from the Department of Transportation, the Department of Health, the Department of Agriculture, and it's co-chaired by the chair of DLNR and the chair of DOA. And so they started to draft their own rules to provide an additional layer of regulatory authority over invasive species. And we're trying to address that regulatory gap right now, which has been quite daunting, but is one of the major pathways we've identified for coconut rhinoceros beetle moving out of Oʻahu and into our neighbor islands. And I think that's another important perspective to have from an invasive species in the city and county of Honolulu, is how we're impacting our neighbor counties, right? We don't want to have our problems impacting them if we can help it. So this regulatory authority should help us stymie that spread over to those neighboring counties. Excuse me. So that's just one example, but yes, we do. We work on a number of the pathways.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nate, for just expanding on it. I want to open it up to our other commissioners. Any comments or questions for Nate? If so, feel free to unmic or raise your hand. Excuse me, unmute. Yeah. Brad, Commissioner Romain.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nate, for that really informative presentation. I learned a lot. You mentioned among the recommendations the need to expand cooperation, networking locally and nationally. I might have missed in the logo slide you had at the end. Can you talk a bit about the Pacific Risk, the regional invasive species and climate change network we have? There's also a national network there. I'm wondering how you're working with them. And full disclosure, I work with them a little bit indirectly through the Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center. So just wondering how you're working with them and how we might support better networking between your two organizations. And just also wanted to raise awareness about that program as well, since I didn't hear mention of it.
Yeah, I appreciate the plug. I've known Elliot for a long time and worked with him on a number of different projects in the past. And Pacific Risk is one of the areas that I think that network is building and being continually being strengthened. And one of the things that we depend on Pacific Risk for is sharing a lot of the research, right? They do excellent webinars and an excellent job of sharing resources and publications that help inform our strategies. So we do work with them from a standpoint of getting into contact with more research, and we should do a better job of working with them in terms of expanding our network. And I think one of the ways that we can use that is, when we have these higher level invasive species meetings that are pretty prevalent in the state right now, making sure that we're extending the invitation to climate scientists, making sure we're including folks like Clay Trowernick, fire researcher, making sure that we're including Elliot Parsons at Pacific Risk, who does participate a fair amount. But yeah, I think that's a really great plug in a really important organization and relationship that we should continue to strengthen and build. So thanks, Brad. I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you, Nate.
Great. Thank you, Nate. And thank you, Commissioner Romain. Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. It was a fantastic presentation and really comprehensive. I have a question about coordinating across the interface with the ocean and who are the right people to bring about invasive species in the nearshore environment.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not something that you typically would think here in Hawaii, but actually from the invasive species standpoint, it is much more focused on terrestrial conservation than it is marine conservation. And that is a huge gap that folks at the coordinating group for alien pest species, Christy Martin, who I mentioned before, she's trying to fill that gap. But I think this is a really good opportunity to talk about how state and county levels can work together, because although most of our marine invasive species work is done on a statewide level, there's no reason we can't be, working more closely from the state level with the different counties and from the county level with state entities. So I think definitely identifying folks over at Department of Aquatic Resources is really good. Making excuse me, making sure to keep folks like Sea Gaps and Pacific Risk in these conversations when we're talking about climate resiliency or invasive species is going to be really important.
Great. Thank you, Nate. Any follow-up, Kirsten?
Yeah, I just wonder if I work a little bit with folks at DAR, and I mean, similar to your, your presentation, too many issues, too few people and resources, right? So anywhere where we can cross-pollinate with native species, okay, cross-pollinate across the two frontiers I think is really important. So we are not duplicating efforts. And obviously there's a lot that's similar, even though it would be the marine environment. A lot of the work you guys are doing could probably translate over. So I don't know what the right mechanisms are or how we can think about this, but it's good to hear Christy is trying to fill the gap.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of gaps, but I think one thing that is starting to help invasive species management from the city and county of Honolulu's perspective is Councilmember Kia Aina did introduce and get a resolution passed last year. That really, it just says, the county is dedicated to working with state and federal partners in battling against invasive species. And I think that's a great way to start and a great place to start. Maybe there's an opportunity for another resolution that just highlights the nexus between invasive species and climate resiliency, because once it's out there and once it's out in that arena, I think that gets their wheels turning, gets folks thinking about these connections and exploring that connection more. So I appreciate you asking that question and providing those comments, because I hadn't really thought about that before, but maybe that's a good opportunity, a good place to start. Oh, excuse me.
Great. Well, thank you, Commissioner Olson and Nate. It's 10:48, and so I'm going to, if there are no other comments from our commissioners, I am actually going to move to comments from our public. And we do have a question in the room. Maya, if you would like to share that question, that'd be great.
Hi, Chair. It's Cross. The question
Hi,
is coming from me. Thank you so much. Nate, my question was, so last year the state passed around 29 million biosecurity bill, and then this year HB 427 just passed conference, pushing for more Department of Ag support. Do you think that with these measures we're moving towards the right direction at a kind of good pace, or do you think we're very behind?
I appreciate that question so much, given all of the time that this session has taken from me. Yeah, so the biosecurity bill that turned into Act 231 that was passed last year in session was vetoed down to $10 million for the Department of Agriculture's biosecurity efforts. And similarly to House Bill 427, providing the Department of Agriculture with additional resources will always be a good idea. However, there are some components of that House bill that may actually reduce our capacities to battle invasive species, because if we funnel all resources to one agency, that's really putting all the responsibility and all of the work onto one agency. And we know that even with those major investments, that there's still way more work to be done. So while I think all of us in the invasive species realm welcome increased investments to the Department of Agriculture, it shouldn't come at the expense of other organizations. And that's what we fear with House Bill 427. I haven't seen the final version. If it did, I knew it was in conference. So I'll have to go take a look at that. But the major issue that we have with that bill is moving the Hawaii Invasive Species Council from the Department of Land and Natural Resources to the Department of Agriculture. And one of the issues we have with that is where we fear that then invasive species is only going to be looked at through an agricultural lens, and all the resources are going to be dedicated to agricultural invasive species. And that threatens and jeopardizes a lot of the important work we do in the Mauka regions, but it also threatens the almost non-existent marine work that we do. And so, despite a lot of testimony from the public in opposition to that portion of the bill, and a lot of testimony from um, experts and organizations in invasive species, including testimony from the Department of Agriculture saying, we don't want you to move this. Unfortunately, the will of the legislature was continuing to push the movement of the HISC from DLNR to DOA. So it's a little bit of a wait and see. We definitely appreciate the increased attention on biosecurity and invasive species from the legislature and all the hard work those folks are doing. We just want to make sure that the resources are put out fairly to the right people. Otherwise, we're going to have a net negative when we should be having really an exponential rise in response. We could actually be having a net negative response. But I really appreciate that question. Thank you.
No, thank you, Nate, and thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Cross. I think Maya also noted that we have a comment on Facebook by Sandy Ward. She commented at 10:34 a.m. It may have paralleled with something you were presenting, Nate, but it says, as well as the areas around Pu'uloa, I'm assuming Pu'uloa Beach Park. Maya, I don't know if there's more that we can expand on that, but that was a comment. So
I think that was in relation to the fountain grass comment and wildfire risks, I think, but we can go back and check later.
Yeah,
just noting for Nate.
Yeah, but I think Maya was noting as well. So awesome.
Yeah, there's a number of areas on the island that actually do have invasive fountain grass and fire fuel grass. It's not as worrisome in the windward areas, but it's still worrisome. It's very bad in some of the valleys on the west side, but there's fountain grass populations above the Poly Highway. There's fountain grass next to or just above Diamond Head Beach Park. So it's definitely something we need to be aware of. And unfortunately, it's so widespread that an organization like ours, we have no capacity to tackle something that widespread.
Got it. Well, before we move on, any other comments from the group? All right. Thank you, Maya. I just want to say, Nate, this was super informative. I think we all learned a lot, and I just want to thank you for your work with the commission. And I think we all agree we look forward to seeing the deeper collaboration you make with both Commissioner Olson and Vice Chair Osuka on the development of our tourism and climate change guidance document. So thank you again, Nate. Hope you feel better soon as well. Commissioners, we're at 10:53. We have a few more items, and I don't know what your schedules allow, but I think we need potentially 10 to 15 more minutes to get through. And so if that's okay, we're just going to push through. And if you do need to leave, please let me know. But in the essence of time, I'm going to consolidate agenda items 8 and 9 together. I preemptively sent it in the chat. I was trying to tee it up, but everyone's got the info. What we really wanted to talk about was our next and our first in-person meeting in May, on May 6th in the Waianae community at the Waianae Neighborhood Community Center. So Vice Chair Osuka and I have been working with members out in the community to develop an agenda and to have our meeting tee up to the monthly neighborhood board meeting with the Waianae community. And so in the chat, what I threw in with you guys is really our current draft form of the agenda. And we really wanted to kind of focus the topics on aspects that were relevant to the community. So right now we have 2 presenters confirmed. Our own Commissioner Romine will be speaking about a project in Pi'inamoku. And then we have Parker Kushima, who will be speaking about the Waianae sort of community-led resilient energized program. So I just want to sort of get your guys' feedback because we commonly don't have this opportunity where all commissioners can look at the agenda. But we do need to, by sunshine law, publish it a week before. So want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Unlike our typical virtual meeting, we are trying to keep this to an hour. I think we'll probably be at an hour 15, 20 at this point. Hard to say because it is our first in-person meeting. It will be at 5 o'clock. And so some of the other things that we are hoping is that if commissioners could arrive a bit earlier, maybe around 4:30 or so we could just get oriented, make sure all the things work. We have hired, thanks to OCCSR, we will be having audio and video, so we will be streaming as well this meeting. So we will be able to engage with others. Yeah, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts so that we can collectively make this a productive and useful meeting. So feel free to unmic, raise your hand.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. This looks like, yeah, I'm looking forward to this meeting. This is going to be really nice to get out in the community, especially in Waianae. Remind me, is this being tacked on? Is this related to a neighborhood board meeting as well?
Well, the neighborhood board meeting is at 6 p.m. So we tried to
After us.
organize, yeah, strategically. So, and we did reach out to the neighborhood board chair last month. Kiana was able to pop in and tell them that we were planning our meeting. So we're trying to do some coordination. We did reach out to them and ask if there were topics that they would like us to touch upon. We didn't hear back, so we did then our own efforts to reach out. So we hope that there's some connection, and I think once the agenda is published, we will continue to reach out to the chair and other members of the neighborhood board.
Well, that being said, if they need to
Sorry,
start right at 6, this is an ambitious agenda
I
for
know.
1 hour, and I'm
I
very
know.
pleased to be part of it. I could try to condense my part down if needed.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's a very aggressive agenda. And then we don't commonly also post the minutes of the duration of each presentation. But the intention is that the Q&A is also sort of folded in there. And it's hard to say how that will actually occur, right? Because we don't know how many people will physically attend, right? And how many comments we may get virtually as well. So it is a play and see sort of scenario. One opportunity, if I could go to the draft agenda 5, when we were speaking with community there, given just the upcoming summer, there was, just interest to learn more about how to address urban heat and kind of wildfire. And I do know in January, we had a nice coordinated effort to talk about urban heat, the efforts from the city. So Director Sullivan, that might be an opportunity. I know we reached out to you asking your office to present, but maybe there could be a way to save time is to sort of further abbreviate the discussion and maybe supplement also with handouts if there is, information in that form for community members.
Happy to do that, Chair. It's your pleasure. Please just let us know how much time to plan for, and we'll do so.
All right, great. Thank you, Director Sullivan. Director Olson.
Can I jump in? Sorry, Kirsten.
Yes.
Just to answer Brad's question a little bit further. Thank you,
Sure.
Kirsten. Sorry. Brad, I just wanted to add that Melanie and I met with Auntie Shar. She's a really prominent Waianae community member, and asked her these same questions because we didn't hear back from the Waianae neighborhood board chair and or anybody else who was at the meeting that we sort of prompted for suggestions. And so that item number 6 is not confirmed, Kirsten, to answer your question. We're going to meet with Clay a little bit later to talk about whether he can come and speak about wildfire risks, as well as any actions the community members can take to prepare for wildfire season. But the specific ask from Auntie Shar was, well, the suggestion was wildfire, but the specific asks is that we bring resources and provide actions to the community for what they can do to address some of these climate challenges that folks are facing specifically on the Waianae coast. So that's sort of what prompted this agenda structure that Melanie and I drafted, is like, providing education, but also what can folks do on the Waianae coast to prepare for wildfire season, prepare for the, hot summer coming, and things of that nature. So that was the specific asks that we got from her. So that's kind of what the agenda is sort of targeted to. Sorry, Kirsten. Thank you.
No problem. Actually, that was a perfect context that I was going to ask for, because we want to make sure that we take, this is a unique advantage to have hopefully some community members there and to tell them about the things that the city and county are doing that can help them, and resources that they can tap into, right? So I think not lecturing them necessarily about the science of climate change and other aspects, but really making this very practical. On the flip side, the public input is very short in this meeting. Are we going to stay for the community meeting? And how will that work with sunshine laws, et cetera? Like if they ask us follow-up questions or have longer discussions, I guess like just giving them time to respond, react, like what's the mechanism that's planned for that?
Great question. We have not discussed that. I think formally the commission is not, like the commission as a whole is not intending to formally attend the neighborhood board meeting. We're just trying to sort of coordinate both meetings being in the same place to optimize opportunity for community if they want to engage with both parties. But certainly I think commissioners can attend if they want. And I don't know if there will be any sort of sunshine concerns, right? Because we're not formally attending as commission. I don't know if we have anyone on corporate council to answer, but I think that, I think we should be okay in that sense. But Ben, go ahead.
Chair
Yeah.
Islam, I might suggest you follow up with Cor, because we're having a meeting, and then if all of the parties are there,
yeah,
and they continue to talk about the same subject area, the public doesn't have the opportunity to really engage in that same venue anymore. But I'm not 100% certain on that, so it makes me a little apprehensive for sure.
Okay, so should we get an interpretation from corporate counsel prior to officially send an inquiry in?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Just send a quick email. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that today then. So it is a possibility. I think it's just we'll just sort of see how these meetings coincide. I do want to add that when we were speaking to Auntie Shar, she did ask a lot of questions about what is the Climate Commission, because community members will not know what is our role. And so that is why we do have agenda item 4 in there. I was intending to do a very brief intro about the commission, prepare maybe no more than 4 slides, but then give opportunity for each commissioner to introduce themselves, right? Their areas of expertise and the sort of the perspective that we bring to the commission. So commissioners, please be prepared to kind of share something. As a typical slide, I will probably be taking the snippet that's on OCCSR's website about the commission, sort of our profile pictures and kind of the little abbreviated versions of what we focus on. So that will be what agenda 4 is. Other than that, I think our goal is trying to move through this meeting and being kind of as nimble as we can. We have been working with Deputy Director Fox, ensuring that we meet our equity pledge. So we are trying to address kind of the keiki needs. And I believe we'll be having some level of activity for them while we are convening as a commission. Other than that, I think if you guys feel that the agenda looks okay, we are intending to start this meeting at 5. So if you're unable to arrive by 4:30, it'd be great to get there by 5. Just note that it is going in the direction of traffic. So please account for travel time in your departure from wherever you are leaving. Okay. In regards to our next meeting dates, I have asked the office to send out a poll dates for August, September, and I believe October. And then we had done an initial poll for June 27th. So there should be a calendar invite going out to everyone. We typically try to have these meetings on a Friday from 9 to 11. Before I move on quickly, because we do try to get community input, public input on each topic, are there any questions to our draft agenda for May? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to move over to communication and correspondence from the public. I believe it was in our packet. We did receive communication on April 14th from Christy Hart Henriksen from UC Davis. She is a PhD student. She is asking if she could speak with us to understand some of our experiences and insights in the realm of adaptation planning and implementation. She's looking to have a conversation about 25 to 45 minutes. I don't know if all commissioners had a chance to look at this communication, but if there is interest, please let me know so that we can kind of respond to her appropriately. We do try to get back to all those that reach out to us with comment. I'd love to get back to her before our next May meeting, so hopefully within the week of this meeting. Okay, is there anything that I'm sorry, I know there's chat going on. Maybe Kiana and Brad, you just want to unmute for a second, and so we could just talk about it.
Sure, Brad, I just wanted to clarify that Melanie and I sort of budgeted for each speaker or the 3 key presentations, including yours, to be 10 minutes, and then allocating about 5 minutes for questions. So it doesn't have to be a full 5 minutes for questions. It also doesn't have to be a full 10 minutes for you to present, but our thought was no more than 10 minutes for your presentation, as well as the other sort of key items. Does that help clarify the time?
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I was just offering back, 5 minutes or, whatever you need to shorten up my part to make some space in the agenda if needed.
I think when we, go ahead, Kiana.
Go ahead.
I think when we speak to Clay today, because he has expressed interest, but we haven't yet confirmed him. When we speak with him later this afternoon, we'll know for sure who the presenters are, and then we can finalize the times, durations with everyone, and then issue it out. We'll let you know as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Just one more request, Melanie, for Brad. Once or you can start reaching out earlier, but once the agenda is published, maybe that's an easier way to share. If you could share with folks you've been working with on the Waianae Coast and see if they'd be interested in attending, that would be great. I would love for some help from the commissioners to help advertise the meeting. But Brad, I thought you specifically, since you have a project there, but all of you, that would be great.
Yeah, we have a coordinator that we've hired through that project in Waianae now, who I think is going to be there, and I can introduce, and they can help spread the word for us as well.
Great. Awesome. But yeah, I think we're looking forward to this, and it'll be the first time I think we're all convening together. So I think it's going to be great. Okay. So jumping back to 10, if anyone does have interest in speaking to, we could do it as 2 commissioners on Christy Hendrickson's requests. Please let me know by next Friday at the latest, so we can kind of get back to her. Okay, I am going to move on to 11. For the remaining public out there, thank you so much for sticking around with us. Are there any public input items that are currently not on the agenda? Maya says there are none. Any for those in our virtual room? Seeing no hands, I'm thinking we're good. Great. Any announcements? Okay.
Just plugged my monthly announcement about the state electric bike, electric moped rebate. So you can receive up to $500 or 20% off the retail price of a new electric bike or electric moped rebate if you meet one of the 3 criteria. So you participate in a low-income assistance program, you do not own a motor vehicle, or you are currently enrolled in school, college, or university. There's information about the rebate in the chat. That's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kiana. Other than that, I think this was a great productive meeting. We always seem to have more to talk about than the time we have allotted. So commissioners, if you have any thoughts on how we can kind of make our meetings more efficient and or spread the wealth of knowledge, both Kia and I are welcome your thoughts. We can also plan to discuss this perhaps at our June meeting. So, but always great to see everyone, always great to convene. I look forward to seeing you all in just 2 weeks. And please enjoy the rest of Earth Month. I'm going to call the meeting to adjourn at 11:10. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
all. Thanks,
Bye.
Chair.
Thank you, everybody,
Thanks,
for
everyone.
attending. Thank you, Melanie.